2024's true crime stories are shocking, and you won't believe what's coming. On a Hollywood set, a single gunshot changed everything. In a quiet college town, four students vanished in one terrifying night. A famous rapper faces a retrial for a chilling double murder. A couple obsessed with doomsday prophecies took two children's lives. And a little girl disappeared, exposing failures no one saw coming. 5 cases, 1 year, endless questions. Stay tuned, the truth behind the headlines will shock you. Welcome to CrimeLens, your window into shocking true crime stories and high-profile trials. We break down the facts, reveal hidden details, and uncover the truth behind the headlines. Subscribe now and hit the bell. Stay on top of every twist and turn. In the small town of Rexburg, Idaho, a quiet and religious community was shaken by one of the strangest and most heartbreaking cases America has ever seen. It began as a story about faith, but it soon turned into a story about death, control, and twisted beliefs. At the center of it all was a man named Chad Daybell, once known as a humble author of spiritual books, and a woman named Vallow, who called herself a chosen mother preparing for the end of the world. Before all the chaos, Chad Daybell lived what seemed like a simple life. He was married to a woman named Tammy, and together they raised 5 children. Chad worked as a cemetery sexton, someone who maintains graves, and he wrote religious fiction that talked about preparing for the end times. His books earned him a small following among people who believed that the world would soon face a great cleansing before Christ's return. Around 2018, Chad's world changed forever when he met Vallow, a beautiful, charismatic woman from Arizona. Lori was already known in her community for her deep interest in end-of-times prophecies. When she met Chad at a church event, the two instantly connected, not just romantically but spiritually. They both claimed to have visions about the coming apocalypse and believed that they had special roles to play in saving the chosen few. Soon, their shared faith began to take a dark turn. Chad told Lori that some people around them were no longer human. He said they were zombies, people whose bodies had been taken over by dark spirits. Lori believed him. Together, they created a small circle of followers who listened to their strange teachings about light and dark spirits, preparing for an end that never came. Lori had 2 children from her previous marriage, Tylee Ryan, a 16-year-old girl, and Joshua J.J. Vallow, a cheerful 7-year-old boy with autism. People who knew them said they were happy, funny, and full of life. But once Chad and Lori began their relationship, friends noticed something change. Lori became distant. She withdrew her kids from school, stopped talking to friends, and started making strange claims about needing to prepare for the end of days. By September 2019, the children were gone. Lori told everyone that Tylee was studying at college and JJ was staying with a friend. But as weeks turned into months, no one had seen or heard from the children. Concerned family members contacted the police. When police questioned Lori in late 2019, she smiled calmly and refused to say where her kids were. At the same time, tragedy struck another family. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, suddenly died in her sleep. At first, her death was ruled natural, but many found it suspicious. Just weeks later, Chad and Lori got married in Hawaii. That's when the world really started paying attention. 2 newlyweds, smiling on a beach, while 2 children were missing and a wife had mysteriously died. Something didn't add up. Investigators began digging deeper. They found that Lori and Chad had been using burner phones, lying about their location, and moving money from accounts belonging to the children. Even more chilling, they discovered that Lori's brother, Alex Cox, was involved. He was the one who shot Lori's ex-husband months earlier and claimed self-defense. Later, Alex died suddenly too, from what doctors said was natural causes. Police traced phone data showing Alex's phone pinging near Chad Daybell's backyard, right around the time the children disappeared. In June 2020, after months of public searching and heartbreak, police finally returned to that property. They began digging behind Chad's house, and what they found confirmed everyone's worst fears. They discovered the remains of JJ and Tylee buried in shallow graves. JJ was wrapped in plastic and tape. Tylee's remains were burned and hidden. When the news broke, the entire nation grieved. People who had followed the case for months wept for the children they had hoped would be found alive. Lori was arrested first, charged with deserting her children. Chad was later arrested after the discovery of the remains. Both faced multiple charges including murder and conspiracy to commit murder. During the investigation, detectives revealed the couple's bizarre digital footprints, emails, notes, and messages where they discussed people being possessed and the need to cast out dark spirits. They even rated friends and family members on a light-to-dark scale, deciding who was pure and who was evil. It became clear that in their minds, they believed killing people was freeing them from dark spirits. What had started as religious obsession ended in horror. In 2023, Lori Vallow's trial began first. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and citizens who had followed the story for years. Witnesses described her as calm and smiling, even when photos of her children were shown. Prosecutors said she used religion to justify murder. The jury agreed. Lori was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Chad Daybell's trial was delayed to 2024 because he faced the death penalty. As of this year, his trial continues, with prosecutors arguing that he planned the murders to gain control, both spiritually and financially. They say Chad wanted to start a new life with Lori and used his so-called prophecies as a cover for his crimes. For many in Rexburg, the case felt like a betrayal. Chad had been one of their own, a local author, a church member, a father. How could someone so ordinary become the center of such darkness? It forced people to question how far blind faith can go and how manipulation can hide behind spirituality. Family members of the victims, especially JJ's grandparents, Larry and Kay Woodcock, became strong voices for justice. They spoke publicly about their love for the children and the need for the truth to come out. Their emotional presence in court reminded everyone that this was not just a strange story. It was a tragedy that destroyed real lives. Today, the Doomsday Couple, as the media calls them, are symbols of how dangerous false beliefs can become. The story of Chad Daybell is no longer about prophecy or faith. It's about control, deception, and loss. Many people who once followed Chad's writings now say they feel betrayed. Others see it as a warning. When someone claims to speak for God but asks for your blind loyalty, something is deeply wrong. The case continues to raise questions about mental health, religious influence, and how law enforcement handles missing children. It's also a reminder that evil often wears a calm face, that people can hide terrible secrets behind gentle smiles and religious words. And in the quiet town of Rexburg, where life has slowly returned to normal, the memory of two innocent children still lingers. Their names, Tylee and JJ, have become symbols of innocence lost to delusion and obsession. On a cold November night in 2022, the peaceful college town of Moscow, Idaho turned into the center of one of America's most shocking murder investigations. It was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, where students walked home after late-night study sessions, and where everyone knew someone who studied at the University of Idaho. But on November 13th, everything changed. For young college students were brutally murdered in their off-campus home. And for weeks, no one knew who had done it or why. The victims were Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernadle, and Ethan Chapin. All of them were close friends living just a short walk from campus. Kaylee and Madison had been best friends since high school. Both were 21 years old, full of energy, planning for bright futures. Xana, 20, was kind and funny, and Ethan, also 20, was her boyfriend. The four friends had spent that Saturday night like many college students do, going to parties, visiting friends, and finally heading home around 2 a.m. By morning, they were all dead. At around 11:58 a.m., a 911 call came from one of the surviving roommates inside the house. The call reported someone unconscious. When police arrived, they found a scene so violent that even seasoned officers were shaken. The four victims had been stabbed multiple times while they slept or tried to escape. There was no sign of forced entry, no signs of robbery, just horror and confusion. Two other roommates had been in the house during the attack but were unharmed. One of them later told police she opened her door during the night and saw a man in black clothing, wearing a mask, walking toward her. Frozen in fear, she locked her door. That detail would later become one of the key pieces of the investigation. In the days that followed, panic spread across the university. Students packed up and went home. Parents called their children nonstop. The town that once felt safe suddenly felt haunted. Everyone wanted answers, but police gave very few. Weeks passed, and no arrests were made. Rumors filled social media. Maybe it was a stalker, maybe it was someone they knew, maybe it was random. People began suspecting everyone, from ex-boyfriends to professors. The case became national news almost overnight. Behind the scenes, investigators were quietly building a case. They analyzed surveillance footage from nearby streets, collected DNA samples, and tracked down thousands of tips. One small clue began to stand out. A white Hyundai Elantra seen speeding away from the area around the time of the murders. Detectives traced that car model through police databases and campus security cameras. At the same time, forensic experts found a knife sheath near one of the victims. On it was a single male DNA sample. When the DNA was run through genealogy databases, it eventually led them to a name: Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger was a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at Washington State University, just 10 miles away from Moscow, Idaho. He was known as quiet, intelligent, and socially awkward. Some of his classmates described him as intense and fascinated by criminal behavior. He had even posted online surveys asking criminals about their emotions and motives. When police connected his car to the scene and matched his DNA from the knife sheath to DNA collected from his parents' trash, they knew they had found their suspect. On December 30th, 2022, police arrested Bryan Kohberger at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. The news spread instantly. After weeks of fear and uncertainty, there was finally a name, but still no clear motive. Neighbors said Bryan seemed normal in the days before his arrest, but his family noticed he had become distant. When police showed up, he didn't resist. Investigators later revealed that he had driven across the country with his father after the murders, a trip that looked innocent on the surface but raised many questions. When the police released court documents, the public finally saw how carefully the case had been built. DNA, the sample from the knife sheath, was a near-perfect match to Kohberger. Phone data. His phone had been near the victim's house multiple times before the night of the murders, suggesting he had been watching them. Car footage. Security cameras showed his white Hyundai near the crime scene around the time of the attack. The behavioral patterns. He turned off his phone the night of the murders, a move investigators saw as an attempt to hide his location. Even with all of this, the question that haunted everyone was simple. Why? No one knows for sure what Bryan's motive was. He didn't know the victims personally, but investigators believe he might have been obsessed, possibly studying or stalking them. Some experts think he wanted to commit the perfect crime to prove his own intelligence as a criminology student. Others believe he felt socially rejected and was drawn to the idea of control and domination. Whatever the reason, it ended with the loss of 4 young lives full of promise. Bryan Kohberger's trial has been one of the most closely watched in modern times. Cameras are not allowed inside, but every update makes national headlines. He has pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. His defense team argues that the DNA could have been transferred accidentally and that the case is circumstantial. But prosecutors maintain that the evidence is overwhelming and the crime was planned with precision. As the legal battle continues, the families of Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan have worked tirelessly to keep their memories alive. They've organized memorials, scholarship funds, and public tributes. At the University of Idaho, a permanent garden was built in their honor, a place of peace and reflection in a town still recovering from the trauma. Students often leave flowers there, a reminder that behind every headline are real people, real lives, and real heartbreak. The Idaho student murders changed how people view safety on college campuses. It showed how evil can appear in the most ordinary places. It also revealed the power of modern investigation, how DNA, digital footprints, and persistence can bring justice even when the clues seem invisible. For the people of Moscow, Idaho, the case is more than just a crime story. It's a wound that hasn't healed yet, but it's also a lesson about resilience, community, and hope. In the end, justice moves slowly, but it moves surely. And one day, when the full truth is told in court, perhaps those families will finally find the peace they've been searching for since that cold November morning. The world of hip-hop is no stranger to drama, but few stories have shocked fans like that of YNW Melly, a rising star whose songs once topped the charts and whose future seemed unstoppable, until he was accused of murdering his two best friends. It's a story of fame and downfall, of loyalty and betrayal, and of how success can sometimes come with a dark shadow. Jamel Maurice Demons, known by his stage name YNW Melly, was born in Gifford, Florida, in 1999. He grew up in a tough neighborhood where music was his escape from poverty and violence. From a young age, Melly had a natural gift for rhythm and melody. His voice carried both pain and passion, and fans felt it. By his late teens, Melly had become a rising force in rap. His songs like Murder on My Mind and Mixed Personalities with Kanye West catapulted him into fame. He was charming, funny, and talented, but behind the fame, he was surrounded by chaos. Melly was part of a group called YNW, short for Young N*** the World, made up of close friends who grew up together: YNW Juvie, Christopher Thomas Jr., YNW Sockchaser, Anthony Williams, and YNW Bortlin, Cortland Henry. They called each other brothers, often seen laughing, recording, and performing together. But in 2018, that brotherhood ended in blood. On the night of October 26, 2018, something went terribly wrong. According to prosecutors, Melly and Bortlin were riding in a Jeep with Juvie and Sockchaser after a late-night studio session in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. At some point during the ride, police say Melly shot his two friends, Juvie and Sockchaser, from inside the car. After the shooting, investigators believe Melly and Bortlin staged the scene to look like a drive-by shooting. They allegedly drove around with the bodies for hours before finally bringing them to the emergency room, claiming their friends had been shot by unknown attackers on the street. The story didn't make sense to detectives. The bullet holes in the car didn't line up with the version they gave. The trajectory of the shots, the blood patterns, none of it matched a drive-by. It looked like the shots came from inside the vehicle. And so, what began as a tragic loss quickly became a murder investigation. Detectives worked quietly but carefully. They collected cell phone records, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. One of the biggest breaks came from cell phone tracking data. It showed that Melly's phone had been moving in strange patterns the night of the murders, circling around certain areas before heading to the hospital. The timing and movements matched the path of Bortlin's car. Inside the vehicle, forensic experts found gunshot residue and blood spatter patterns that suggested the shots came from the left rear seat, where Melly had been sitting. Prosecutors also uncovered text messages between Melly and others that, according to them, hinted at guilt. In one exchange, Melly allegedly said, "I did that," though his defense claims the messages were taken out of context. In February 2019, YNW Melly turned himself in to police after a warrant was issued for his arrest. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, and his close friend, YNW Bortlin, was charged as an accomplice. The news stunned the music industry. Fans around the world couldn't believe that the same artist who sang about pain and loss might have acted it out in real life. His song Murder on My Mind suddenly took on a chilling new meaning. But Melly insisted he was innocent. In social media posts and interviews, he said he was being falsely accused and that the truth would come out. The first trial began in June 2023, nearly 4 years after the alleged murders. It was broadcast live, drawing millions of viewers, part crime story, part celebrity drama. Prosecutors painted Melly as a young man driven by greed and ego, suggesting the motive was over money disputes and jealousy within the YNW group. They said Melly killed his friends to gain more control over his music career. The defense countered with a simple message. There was no clear motive, no eyewitnesses, and no murder weapon recovered. They argued the state's case was built on speculation, not proof. Throughout the trial, Melly appeared calm, sometimes smiling, sometimes whispering with his lawyers. But behind the calm exterior, his life hung in the balance. Prosecutors were seeking the death penalty. After weeks of testimony, hours of video footage, and emotional statements, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. Some jurors believed the evidence was strong. Others said there were too many unanswered questions. In July 2023, the judge declared a mistrial, meaning the case would have to be tried again. The courtroom erupted in emotion. Melly's mother cried with relief, while the victims' families wept in frustration. For them, it felt like justice had been delayed, not denied. Now, in 2024 and 2025, the retrial is underway. This time, prosecutors say they have refined their evidence, adding new digital forensic analysis, witness statements, and enhanced phone data that they claim places Melly directly at the scene of the shootings. They are again seeking the death penalty, arguing that the crime was cold, calculated, and cruel. The defense team maintains that Melly is innocent, that there's no direct evidence proving he pulled the trigger, and that police rushed to judgment because of his fame. The case remains ongoing, and every new hearing captures headlines. Each side claims to hold the truth, and fans are divided, some standing by their idol, others convinced he is guilty. Lost in the noise are Anthony Williams, YNW Sockchaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., YNW Juvie. Two young men whose lives ended far too soon. Their families continue to fight for justice and remind the world that behind the music and the fame, this case is about friendship, betrayal, and loss. They've spoken publicly about the pain of seeing their sons' names in lyrics and memes, saying the music industry sometimes forgets that these were real people, not just headlines. The YNW Melly case has become a symbol of the thin line between art and reality. Can a song about murder be just music, or does it reveal something darker? Prosecutors used his lyrics as part of their argument, saying they reflected his mindset. But critics argue that using art against artists sets a dangerous precedent. Beyond the courtroom, the story has become a cautionary tale for young artists who rise too fast and fall even faster. It's about how fame can amplify both dreams and demons. As of now, YNW Melly remains in jail, awaiting the final outcome of his retrial. If convicted, he could face life in prison or the death penalty. If acquitted, he might walk free, but the shadows of this case will follow him forever. Whatever the verdict, this story will always be remembered as one of the most haunting intersections of music, murder, and mystery in modern pop culture. And somewhere in Florida, two families still wait. Not for headlines, not for fame, but simply for truth and closure. It was a sunny Florida morning in February 2020 when a 911 call came into the Orange County Sheriff's Office. On the line was a woman sobbing, saying that her boyfriend was dead, that she'd found him after what she described as a game gone wrong. That woman was Sarah Boone, a 42-year-old from Winter Park, Florida. What police discovered at her home would turn that call into one of the most bizarre and haunting true crime stories of recent years. When deputies arrived at Sarah Boone's apartment, they found her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr., dead on the floor in a large blue suitcase. His body was curled up, his head pressed against the zipper. He had no signs of external injury, but he wasn't breathing. Sarah sat nearby, crying and saying over and over, "We were just playing. I didn't mean to hurt him." She told police that she and Jorge had been drinking wine and decided to play hide and seek, that Jorge had climbed into the suitcase himself as a joke. She said she zipped him inside, laughed, and went upstairs to bed, forgetting all about him. But the truth would soon turn out to be far darker. Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres had been together for several years. Friends and neighbors said their relationship was rocky and violent. Police had been called to their home multiple times for domestic disputes. Both had been arrested before. Sometimes she accused him of hitting her. Other times he said she attacked him. Still, they stayed together, caught in what friends described as a cycle of love, anger, and chaos. Sarah was a single mother, and Jorge was known as quiet but sometimes aggressive when drinking. To outsiders, they were a troubled couple trying to make it work. But behind closed doors, things were often explosive. According to Sarah, on the night of February 23, 2020, the couple had been drinking and playing games. At some point, Jorge climbed into a suitcase for fun. Sarah claimed she zipped him in as a joke, and later fell asleep upstairs, thinking he'd gotten out. By the next morning, she said she found him dead inside. Her story sounded unbelievable to investigators. How could someone climb into a suitcase, get zipped up completely, and not get out? Why didn't she hear him struggling or calling out? Then came the evidence that changed everything. During a search of Sarah's phone, detectives found 2 videos recorded that same night. What they saw destroyed her version of events completely. In the videos, Sarah can be heard laughing as Jorge struggles inside the suitcase, gasping for air. He cries out, saying, "Sarah, I can't breathe." And seriously, but she doesn't help. Instead, she mocks him. At one point she says, "That's what I feel like when you cheat on me." Her voice is calm, even playful, but the situation is terrifying. Jorge pleads repeatedly, saying he can't breathe, and she responds, "That's on you. That's what you do to me." When police confronted her with the video, she said she didn't remember recording it. She appeared shocked and defensive, saying she never meant to hurt him. But to investigators, it was clear. This was no accident. The game had turned into a punishment, and a fatal one. Sarah Boone was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that the act was not premeditated but showed a depraved mind, meaning she acted with disregard for human life. She was taken to the Orange County Jail, where she has remained since 2020 awaiting trial. In interviews, Sarah has continued to insist it was an accident. She claims she was drunk, fell asleep, and didn't realize what was happening. But the videos, the tone of her voice, and the lack of effort to help Jorge tell another story. As investigators dug deeper, they learned more about the couple's history. Police reports from earlier incidents described physical fights, jealous arguments, and drunken outbursts. Friends said Sarah often talked about feeling trapped in a toxic relationship. But she also had a temper. One former friend described her as sweet when she wanted to be, but scary when she was angry. The prosecution believes that on that night, Sarah's anger finally boiled over. Whether it started as a joke or revenge, they say she zipped him in to make him suffer, and then left him there as he begged for air. The autopsy revealed Jorge had bruises and cuts consistent with struggling inside the suitcase, along with signs of asphyxiation, suffocating due to lack of oxygen. Sarah Boone's case has faced multiple delays, partly because of the pandemic and partly because of her changing defense teams. She's had several lawyers come and go, and at one point, she even considered representing herself. Prosecutors say the videos speak for themselves. They show intent, cruelty, and a complete lack of mercy. Sarah's defense argues that she had no intention of killing him, that her laughter was nervous, and her comments were made while drunk. They also claim the two had a history of playing rough games when drinking. But for many observers, the video is unforgettable. It's one of the most chilling pieces of real-life evidence ever released publicly, because it captures a person's final moments and their partner's cold reaction. The case went viral online, with thousands of people reacting in shock and anger. Many called Sarah's actions pure evil, while others pointed to the tragic cycle of domestic violence that defined their relationship. Some say it's a story of revenge turned deadly. Others see it as a warning about alcohol, anger, and mental health. But everyone agrees on one thing: the videos changed how people saw Sarah forever. Of 2025, Sarah Boone is still awaiting trial. The prosecution plans to use the phone videos, the 911 call, and forensic evidence to prove she knowingly trapped Jorge and let him die. If convicted, she could face life in prison. Her defense team continues to argue that it was a tragic accident, that she never planned to harm him and was simply too intoxicated to realize what she had done. Either way, the truth is forever captured in those haunting videos. A man begging for help, a woman refusing to listen, and a suitcase that became a coffin. The suitcase murder shocked the world because it was so ordinary. Two people at home, drinking, arguing, and yet it turned into a crime that sounded impossible. It made people wonder how far anger and dysfunction can go before someone crosses a line they can never return from. It's a story about control, revenge, and the dangers of toxic love. And it's a reminder that violence in relationships doesn't always look like weapons or threats. Sometimes it looks like a joke gone too far, a cruel act masked as play, or a person who walks away when they should have opened the zipper. Today, Jorge Torres Jr.'s family continues to fight for justice. They say his death should be remembered not as a strange internet headline, but as the story of a man who didn't deserve to die that way. And Sarah Boone, once just a Florida mom with a normal life, now waits behind bars, facing a future defined by one horrifying decision. Sometimes the most painful crimes aren't about sudden violence. They're about silence. About what happens when a child is failed by every adult who was supposed to protect her. That's what happened to Harmony Montgomery, a little girl from New Hampshire whose bright smile once lit up every room she entered, until she vanished, and no one seemed to notice for nearly 2 years. Her story is not just about a missing child. It's about neglect, broken systems, and a haunting question. How could this happen? Harmony was born in June 2014, a beautiful baby girl with big blue eyes and a shy smile. Her early years were filled with instability. Her parents, Adam Montgomery and Crystal Sorey, struggled with addiction, homelessness, and a chaotic relationship. Because of these challenges, child protection agencies in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire became involved early in Harmony's life. For a while, she lived with her mother. But when Crystal lost custody, Harmony was placed in foster care, where she was said to be happy, healthy, and thriving. Her foster parents adored her. They later said that Harmony loved playing with dolls, singing, and helping around the house. But in 2019, despite warnings from social workers and foster care advocates, custody of Harmony was transferred back to her father, Adam Montgomery, a decision that would soon prove fatal. At first, officials assumed Adam was ready to take responsibility. He was living in Manchester, New Hampshire, with his new wife, Kayla Montgomery, and their 2 young children. To the outside world, it looked like a small, struggling but functioning family. But behind closed doors, things were much darker. Neighbors later told police they rarely saw Harmony outside. They said the apartment seemed crowded, noisy, and sometimes filled with shouting. Adam was known for his temper. He had a long criminal record that included violence, theft, and drugs, yet somehow he had convinced child services he could be a good father. Crystal, Harmony's mother, said she tried for months to contact her daughter. She sent messages, called numbers, even reached out to Adam's relatives, but got no response. Adam always had an excuse. Harmony was fine, she was busy, she was at school. But in truth, Harmony had already disappeared. Investigators later learned that Harmony was last seen alive in late 2019, when she was just 5 years old. One of the most chilling details came from Adam's uncle, who told police he saw Adam hitting Harmony hard in the face, punishing her because her baby brother had started crying. The uncle said he saw Harmony with a black eye, but when he confronted Adam, he brushed it off, saying, "I did it. She's my kid. I'll discipline her how I want." That was one of the last times anyone outside the home saw her. Kayla Montgomery, Adam's wife, later admitted to police that Adam had killed Harmony after one of his violent outbursts. She said he was driving the family around when Harmony started having trouble with her eyes, and that he struck her repeatedly until she went silent. Instead of calling for help, Adam allegedly hid her body, keeping it in various locations for months, including the trunk of a car, and later a cooler at an apartment complex. It's a detail so horrifying that many who followed the case said they couldn't sleep after reading it. For almost 2 years, no one officially reported Harmony missing. Her mother, Crystal, said she called Child Protective Services multiple times, begging them to check on her daughter. But agencies in 2 states kept passing the responsibility back and forth. It wasn't until December 2021, nearly 2 years after Harmony was last seen, that Crystal finally convinced authorities to open a missing persons case. By then, Adam and Kayla had separated. When police questioned them, their answers didn't match. Kayla first said Harmony was living with her mother. Adam said she was fine and living elsewhere. But investigators quickly discovered that was a lie. Crystal hadn't seen Harmony since 2019. The police searched multiple locations: homes, cars, yards, storage units. They found old toys, clothes, and traces of possible evidence, but not Harmony. The community launched massive searches, vigils, and online campaigns using the hashtag Justice for Harmony. Yet, despite all the effort, Harmony was gone, and nobody knew where. Early 2022, Adam Montgomery was arrested, not for murder at first, but for assault and child endangerment related to earlier abuse. His wife Kayla was arrested for welfare fraud after continuing to collect food benefits for Harmony, even though the child hadn't been seen in years. As the investigation continued, more horrifying details surfaced. Prosecutors said that after killing Harmony, Adam kept her remains for months before disposing of them. They used witness testimony, text messages, and forensic evidence, including traces found in his apartment, to build their case. By 2023, Adam Montgomery was officially charged with second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and falsifying physical evidence. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Kayla eventually agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, providing key information in exchange for a reduced sentence. For the public, Harmony's case became a national symbol of systemic failure. How could a little girl vanish for 2 years before anyone even noticed? The governor of New Hampshire ordered a full review of Child Protective Services, calling the case every parent's nightmare. Investigators revealed shocking gaps in communication between state agencies, including missed home visits and ignored warnings. Many believe that if someone had followed up earlier, Harmony might still be alive today. Despite the heartbreak, Harmony's mother, Crystal Sorey, never gave up. She has spoken publicly many times, holding pictures of her daughter and demanding justice. She describes Harmony as the sweetest little girl, who loved playing with makeup, wearing sparkly dresses, and helping take care of her baby brother. "She was my everything," Crystal said during a vigil, "and I will never stop fighting for her." The community built memorials filled with pink flowers, balloons, and teddy bears, all symbols of the little girl who should have been safe at home, not lost to violence. As of 2025, Adam Montgomery's murder trial continues. Prosecutors say they have strong evidence proving his guilt, even without a recovered body. Forensic testing, witness testimony, and digital records all point to his involvement. If convicted, Adam faces life in prison without parole. Meanwhile, New Hampshire lawmakers have pushed for major reforms in how child welfare agencies handle custody transfers and missing children reports. The state even created Harmony's Law, aimed at preventing another tragedy like hers. The story of Harmony Montgomery reminds the world that true crime isn't just about shocking violence. It's about the quiet failures that allow it to happen. She was a little girl caught in a tug-of-war between 2 broken parents and 2 states that didn't listen soon enough. Her death exposed the cracks in a system meant to save children, and showed how easy it is for the most vulnerable to disappear when adults look the other way. Today, Harmony's name stands for something larger, not just loss, but awareness. Her story has inspired other families and social workers to speak up when something feels wrong. And for those who followed her case, she will always be remembered not for what happened to her, but for the light she brought in her short time on Earth. In the end, Harmony Montgomery's story teaches a painful truth. Sometimes monsters don't hide in the dark. They live right inside our homes. And the fight for justice isn't only about punishing the guilty. It's about protecting the next child before it's too late. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now for more crime stories.